Welcome back, all my 40k fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation to bring you another Warhammer 40k faction-focused video. This week, we'll be joined with Lane, DeathWatch extraordinaire. DevWatch list has been his current running thing. And we're going to touch on some questions that I've seen a couple times in the comment section, and that is, we're playing these lists, we're playing these things competitively, but yet great with Hypercrypt Legion recently. Matt, congratulations to Matt and his Hypercrypt for going and taking LVO. Have a very similar playstyle to Grey Knights, and your Deathwatch and its DevWatch that we've been working on having some more brutality. I mean, you've had a lot more success with Deathwatch. See, I'm already messing it up this edition than more people have had. And one of the questions that come up is, why are these armies having such low thresholds on Metawatch win rates versus some other armies? And that's kind of a question that we've seen quite a bit. We want to address some of the stuff within what we've done with our list, et cetera, that we've seen occur over this edition right now, and why we still run these lists when we ourselves go to tournaments with the intent of trying to go 5-0, 6-0, whatever it may be, and win the whole event. So why would we take an army that is so low tier? And that's what we want.
First of all, I have 15,000 points of Deathwatch, so I'm going to be playing the Deathwatch.
That's partially, but you also have quite a few other armies at your disposal too.
Well, I guess now with the way GW is kind of doing the codexes, really the Marines can be anything. It used to be more particular about what army you're running and how they were painted, but now I can make my Deathwatch any chapter, really.
Correct. Now, looking into that, so as always, we'll finish off to segue into it, guys. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do. Turn the bell to get notified on all the content that we bring you here in the channel, including more videos such as this, where we focus on more of the factions. As we move forward, Lane's going to be able to talk more about Deathwatch, and we'll get some stuff on the channel that's just his take, his look into Deathwatch. But in this video, we just want to focus on the Metawatch, as well as our beliefs going into these armies. And
I'm going to bring up the Metawatch rankings. I think the most recent ones.
Absolutely.
Okay, you can go ahead and start talking.
Absolutely, because I'm going to bring up some of our YouTube videos that we've had and try and answer some of the questions and comments that we see from our different videos as well. Different comments and questions that we've answered, but may have gotten missed in the loop. And there were some great questions that we've had. Like, as I've said many times, I absolutely love the community that we're a part of. Very, very, so much growth, so much strength in just the content, the information that we're trying to put out there that is developed by content and questions and comments that's been brought from other players who say, hey, what about this? What about that? There was conversations with Frontline Gaming and ITC and how they run their events and stuff like that. And as well, now looks like Games Workshop is going to be taking over the LVO, which from what we've heard personally from people involved with Games Workshop, representatives of Games Workshop and stuff like that, what they've said is going to occur isn't going to be that much of a change. It isn't as scary. It's just going to be Games Workshop getting more involved, which hopefully means prize support.
That's all I'm hoping for. It doesn't have to be anything big. Just give us something.
The biggest thing I'm hoping for personally with this is that we see, and I know that some people are going to get already the boos when I say this, the death of player placed terrain. I gave a pause there for a moment so people could just go boo, boo, and that stuff. But hear me out. I like player placed terrain. I think player placed terrain is very fun and adds a new dynamic to the game. However, within the time windows of restriction that we have for competitive tournaments, placing terrain can be overcomplicated. If every single table at a tournament had 10 pieces of terrain on each one of them, and each one of them were completely solidified and solid on a base where you were literally just picking up an entire building with its base and everything and putting it down, all 10 pieces, then it would be much quicker, and I would have a completely different opinion about it. But at this time, that's not the terrain that we see. A lot of the terrain has little pieces and different construction and stuff like that we have to utilize and have to take into consideration when we're putting the terrain down on the table. And sadly, that can take a lot of time away from the game, especially if you go up against someone who has a more swarmy model-based army. You might not be able to make it to the end of the game. So that's my only issue with player place terrain. I don't have an issue with the concept of it. I don't have an issue to the extra level of tactics that it brings to the table. I like it. I like going with it both ways. You know, standard place terrain. I often make the football analogy of football players practice on turf, practice on grass. They know when they're going into a stadium what they're going to be playing on. It's not suddenly you go to a stadium and, oh, hey, by the way, today, before the game, we actually rolled a D20 and we got a 20. So the grass is all going to be replaced with ice and there's sharks in the end zone.
I might watch football if they did that.
Don't get me on the logic of how sharks are able to survive in pools that are also next to a frozen football field.
They're Arctic sharks.
I guess that's what it is. Arctic sharks with lasers on their head too. Lasers as well. Football is going through the uprights and zapped out of the sky. But needless to say, that's not a thing that happens. So I do like the fact that we know what we're playing on before we get there, when we get there, you know, everything we can practice on that. But you can also practice player place terrain. And within the restrictions of how far terrain needs to be placed from each other, from the table edge, objective markers, there is still going to be some limitation of terrain. And it should start to be like, once 1, 2, or 3 pieces get placed out there, the rest kind of start falling in place. So I don't mind the player place terrain. And again, like when you look back like 20 years ago, we never would have even had the aspect of like the level of what 40K was competitively 20 years ago.
We'd have cereal boxes out on the table and
DVD
shoe boxes, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's now it's so much different. So maybe 5 years from now, maybe next month, maybe a year from now, we're going to see terrain setups that are able to be utilized better for player place terrain. Yeah. And I think that then that could be something we see. Games Workshop, they have their terrain pack. They may start to push that more to utilize it.
Yeah, I don't think they can really mandate that because the terrain is so specific. You know, you can't tell a store what they need to buy unless they start giving the terrain to stores for free. You know that, but I doubt they'd be doing that. But it's so difficult to say you must use this terrain layout. If you have a 20-player event, you need 10 tables of a type of terrain that you don't have. That's.
But see, with Games Workshop being involved in it now, they could say you need to use this terrain layout, and then they're the ones who have the terrain that go to these big major events that they're throwing, and they're bringing the party. They're bringing everything to set it up.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about the big events and more just to see. I'd hope to see them do some kind of support at smaller events, RTTs, that sort of thing.
Right. I think that's where it gets.
I mean, they have their big. I went to one of their big, well, I have the shirt on, their U.S. Open event in 2022. In October of 22, I went to Chicago for their big event. Myself and Jake, who's been on the channel, we went together and shared a hotel room. It was a great experience. It was a lot of fun. It was really neat to see how they run it, but I'm not as concerned about what they do with that as opposed to what they do at the local level. I think they need to grab a little more prize support for that sort of thing, especially because they don't really run tournaments at their stores. You know, they don't have the space to do it there, and they don't really have the
stores, but they're they're storefronts.
It's a good setup, but at the one near us here in Mayfield, they might be able to squeeze in 3 full-size, 2,000-point games at the most. They couldn't even have 3 of them, so they could have a 6-person tournament. So, but yeah, I'd like to see them. And the prize support doesn't have to be significant. I think they should just produce some kind of, whether it's exclusive objective markers or dice bags or something that are just for people that win at tournaments. I'd like to see that sort of thing come out. But who knows what they're going to do?
I do got to throw this out there. One of my favorite comments that we've received during these like DeathWatch Grey Knight times is the one saying, okay, a 9, 9 assault cannons is crazy, from the madman who has how many Cyclone missile launcher Terminators?
12.
Yeah. Oh, but the assault cannons, that's where he draws the line.
The story of my assault cannon Terminators is long and it's tumultuous, and it's a roller coaster ride of emotions.
Tumultuous. Love it.
I bought 9 assault cannon bits on eBay when they first released the 10th edition rules. Before we even had them, they were like, "Here's what it's going to do," and they're like, "Oh, so if I get all these assault cannons, I can give them dev wounds and their anti-infantry 2-up and their dev wounds. So they're going to be doing devastating wounds on 2-ups." Then Games Workshop was like, "Maybe not," and they immediately changed that. So I didn't have the assault cannons. I didn't put them on any Terminators until the last couple weeks, where I started like, maybe I'm going to try to make assault cannon Terminators work.
So first, let's talk about the Metawatch. Let's go over and start talking about these armies.
We just wanted to talk about Grey Knights and DeathWatch. So DeathWatch are third from the bottom at 46%. 46% is not that terrible, but still, with Eldar at the top at 57%. So our actual difference between top and bottom is probably better than it's been in a long time, with Eldar at 57% and Drukhari at the bottom at 44%. And this is from their November of last year balanced data slate or Metawatch article. So DeathWatch third from the bottom at 46, and Grey Knights just a couple spaces ahead at 47%. So 1% better. And you are, let's see here, 1, 2, 3,
I am playing
4, 5, 6 from the bottom.
Yep. So with that so Grey Knights 6 from the bottom. Where's DeathWatch? You said again?
Third from the bottom.
Third from the bottom. So with that, starting off with DeathWatch. So why do you think initially, DeathWatch being third from the bottom, Grey Knights 6 from the bottom, why do you think that DeathWatch is specifically there?
GW hates us. Yeah. I think it is tough because DeathWatch, I believe, is the least played army in the game right now. Even newer armies like World Eaters of Votan have more people playing them than DeathWatch. So it can be tough to balance something when you have literally the least amount of data on their results. I know I looked at LVO had over 900 players this year, and DeathWatch, I saw a breakdown of all the factions. I think DeathWatch only had 8 players at a 900 player, so less than 1% of LVO was DeathWatch. So there just aren't a lot of people playing it, and they have just multiple times for 10th edition said DeathWatch, no. They nerfed us immediately, the quickest nerf in history before the rule books even came out. They had previewed some of the rules, and people figured out really quickly that basically DeathWatch kill teams could do like 30 dev wounds to infantry squads with ridiculous rule stacking of the stratagems. So, and then they got nerfed again when they nerfed our stratagems. We have 3 stratagems that affect our shooting weapons. They limited them to only affect bolter weapons. I know in the lore, the DeathWatch have their special issue ammo, so it should only affect bolter weapons. However, if we had 20 stratagems and 3 of them only affected bolters, that wouldn't upset me too much. But the fact that we only have 6 stratagems and half of them only affect the bolters on infantry really limits what we have available to us. And the kill teams have had a rough road transitioning from 9th to 10th. The DeathWatch standalone codex hasn't been around that long. I think they were a 7th edition or maybe 8th edition codex where they first got their full standalone army. And the kill teams have always been like troop choices or had OBSEC. And in the current 10th edition, they don't. They're not battle line. Their OC is 1 for all the models, even models that would normally have OC of 2, like the intercessors or heavy intercessors in there. So they don't really hold objectives well, and they really limited the way you can build them out. It used to be you had to take 5 of a base model, like say if you were doing an Indomitor kill team, it was 5 heavy intercessors, and then you could take any mix of Gravis armor Marines, so Eradicators, Aggressors. I'm forgetting the other Grav Marine. Eradicators,
Aggressors.
What's the other one?
Terminators.
No, the Gravis armor ones.
Oh,
the Inceptors.
Inceptors. That's
the jump ones. So, but you could take 5 heavy intercessors and 5 Eradicators. So you can build, and then you could build that team towards that, and you could combat squad per 9th and 8th edition rules. But now they really limited how many you can take. You have to take 5 heavy intercessors, and you can only take a maximum of 2 Eradicators. and they're not really eradicators. They lose their eradicator special rule of rerolling hits, wounds, and damage into vehicles. And then you can only take up to 2 aggressors or a maximum of 2 inceptors. It just creates a really strange build. So I think they can be very frustrating to build and collect. That's why not a lot of people play them. If you want to take a 10-man squad of Sanguinary Guard, you buy 2 boxes of Sanguinary Guard. 10-man Indomitor Kill Team, you have to buy 4 boxes. You need a 5-man Heavy Intercessor.
Yeah, that is
You can only have 2 Eradicators. You can only have 2 Aggressors, and then you'd have to have an Inceptor there too. You have to buy 4 boxes to have 1 Indomitor Kill Team.
But yeah, that can get really frustrating, especially
it's challenging if you go into kill teams, and that's supposed to be the base of a Deathwatch army, having kill teams. It can be very frustrating to build them now. I have a very established collection. Like I said, I have over 15,000 points of Deathwatch painted and based and all ready to go. But for someone who's a newer player, they're not going to have access to that many. No one should ever start playing 40K with Deathwatch. And so a lot of the people just have the firstborn models. So they're doing Proteus kill teams with Terminators and different veterans. And there are a variety of build outs there as well. But they're complicated and it's tough to collect them. So I think there's a lot of things that are holding people back from kind of developing them. And the fact that the kill teams, their special rules are usually pretty good that they have, but then just the weird mix means that you can't take a kill team and say this is going to go kill a vehicle because you've got a 10-man squad with 2 Eradicators in it.
Mm-hmm. And then when you start to get to the realm of not taking kill teams, then you start looking at it and going, but this other Marine faction I can get X, Y, and Z out of. So why am I playing kill teams when I could be playing just standard Marines? And then if I'm playing the standard Marines because of 1, cost, 2, efficiency on the battlefield, you're looking at going, well, I better just play Marines.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's one of those things where it's been, if we want to do an hour-long video of me complaining about this, we could, but I don't think anybody's going to benefit from that. But it's just been a steady progression through 10th edition of making it worse. And the fact is that at the end of 9th edition, through 9th edition, Deathwatch fell in the Metawatch rankings then as well. I think at the end of 9th, we were the lowest rated faction. And then we got this bump at the start of 10th where things felt real strong and good. And then GW just kept knocking them down. When they did the initial nerfing, when Eldar were wildly overpowered, it felt like they nerfed Deathwatch just as hard, if not harder than Eldar. It felt kind of undeserved because they took away, they changed the oath so it didn't affect wound rolls. And then they nerfed Deathwatch's abilities, their stratagems. And then they've done a couple things where when they adjust points on basic Space Marine units, they don't correct the Deathwatch ones. For example, the last balanced data slate, Space Marine Terminators went down a few points. I think they were at 205. They went down to 185. Deathwatch Terminators were at 210. And it's okay if there are a few more points because a 5-man Deathwatch Terminator squad can take 3 heavy weapons. But right now, a Deathwatch Terminator squad is 210, where a regular Marine one is 185. I don't feel like for 2 extra heavy weapons, we should pay an extra 25 points. The heavy weapons are good, but not amazing. I mean, you've got either a plasma cannon, the Cyclone missile launcher, or the assault cannon, which are not bad. But again, the Cyclone really isn't anti-tank. It's only strength 9 and AP 2. And it's only good for elite infantry or basic infantry because you can do a blast. So they're not amazing. I don't think they're worth another 25 points for 2 of them, especially when Black Templars get multi-meltas for 5 points on their vehicles. So I think they sometimes have missed when they reduce the basic Marine units. They don't reduce the points on sometimes the specialized Marine units like the Deathwatch. So that's been kind of a little frustrating to play. But I'm still playing them. Mostly because I figured out how to make the DevWatch thing work because the kill teams just weren't. They would have too many things they run into they just couldn't do work into. The being able to pick up 2 of them with a command point is very strong. The fact that you can buff their bolters for 2 teams with 1 command point feels strong, but it's just not enough. Going from AP1 to AP2 isn't enough right now because there are so many things that you just get cover and reduce AP and then you're not doing any work into them.
Right. So I feel like I already know the answer to this question then. Well, so what keeps you with not running kill teams? Why run the Deathwatch? And I feel like I already know the answer. to it, and I think it involves one specific thing.
Yeah, I definitely I was playing with the kill teams and trying to make them work. And again, like I said, they would work fairly well in the certain matchups, but then sometimes just bounce off of stuff where they're completely useless. Yeah, and then kind of experimenting, trying to take advantage of the fact that Tome of Ectoclades works the way it does. And dev wounds are definitely strong because you definitely slapped me with a bunch of dev wound stuff. And man, I've taken a beating from Eldar so many times because Zach plays Eldar sometimes. And just to get the practice into them, have them play into me, and they have so many dev wounds. And the fact is that Space Marines have had lots of things that do dev wounds. They have very few ways to proc off them. There's very few ways to do full wound rerolls with Marine units in general. There are a few that are twin linked, like on the Gladiator Reaper. It's a twin linked heavy onslaught Gatling cannon. But other than a couple of places, you're not re-rolling the dev wounds, and so you just can't rely on them at all. So DeathWatch do have the Tome of Ectoclades, and per the current wording on it, in your command phase, in one game, it's an enhancement. Your captain has to be on the table to call it off, but in one of your command phases, one time in the game, you pick your Oath of Moment target, you pick a second Oath of Moment target, and then per the wording, you reroll all hits and all wounds into both targets, hits and wounds. So that means once per game, if you have some things that have dev wounds, you can reroll all hits and all wounds. And then, of course, DeathWatch, their mission tactics, their special rule for their army is once per game, you can make your whole army lethal. You give them all lethal hits on shooting and fighting. Once per game, you can make all their 6s to hit become precision. But the one that really procs well with the dev wounds is once per game, my entire army gets sustained on all shooting and fighting. So every gun on 6s to hit is sustained. So if we're re-rolling all hits and re-rolling all wounds, and you take, as I am taking, 100 different shots that have the dev wound ability, and you can get them to teleport into air, or move into shooting range and pick 2 big targets, and pop. In one turn you pop off your Tome of Ectoclades, so you've got 2 targets you're re-rolling all hits and wounds into, and 2 target, and the whole army has sustained for that turn because you pop that off. You can do a lot of devastating wounds, and that really cuts through things that otherwise are extremely durable in this game.
So with that though, let's talk about the Terminators a little bit. Like you said, with your Terminators that you're able to field with this army, you were able to have 3 weapons that on a 5-man squad of Terminators. Which is this not something that all Terminators in the Imperium side of things can have?
Yeah, so typically a Terminator squad is, if it's 5 men, 5 Terminators, you have 1 heavy weapon in it. If you have a 10-man, you have 2 heavy weapons. Well, the DeathWatch Terminators, they have 3 heavy weapons in the squad, no matter how big it is. So if you take a 10-man squad, you have 3 heavy weapons. If you take a 5-man, you still have 3 heavy weapons. And so we take the assault cannons, each one's 6 shots, strength 6, AP 0, 1 damage, but they do have dev wounds. And so a 5-man Terminator squad that has the ability to deep strike has 18 shots that have dev wounds.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's just so much damage. And like I said, like we talked about with the Tome of Ectoclade, it is like the way that this trigger in this works is the first thing it says with Tome of Ectoclades is when you select your Oath of Moment, you may select an additional target. So you are selecting a second target for Oath of Moment. But then the second cadence of the Tome of Ectoclade says, these targets you may re-roll hits and wounds for. It's not going off of Oath of Moment and then we're going into the book.
It doesn't say it's a second oath target. It says you choose your Oath of Moment, you choose a second target, and your whole army will re-roll hits and wounds into both targets.
Directly in the Tome of Ectoclades.
Yeah. They haven't adjusted it yet, and I hope they don't with the upcoming balance data slate, just because DeathWatch are so low in the competitive rankings. I don't see any need for them to...
You're running out of resources.
Yeah, there's no need to beat a dead horse here. Who knows? They might do it. GW can be fickle. Our overlords can be fickle sometimes. But, yeah, it really... Because there are so many things now as we're getting new codexes, things are coming out where, you you know what, you've got a deep striking monolith, and for 1 CP, you can give it a 4-up invul, and it's T13. So even things that are strength 12, like Lasgans, or wounding on a 5, like, how are you supposed to deal with this? Well, I don't care about your toughness because I'm just looking for 6s, and then I don't care about your invul because I'm just
you're just looking for
going
6s
right through. I don't care if you reduce damage by 1. I don't care if you cut damage in half. The only thing that really affects it is feel no pains. So obviously some things do have good feel no pains, but even like going into your Satans, they've got 12 wounds. So with a feel no pain, the average math is that if I do 20 wounds to it, you do have 5-up feel no pains, I should pick it up. And we've seen that with just the dev wounds in my army, I can do
pick up 2 Catans.
Yeah, I can do 30 to 40 dev wounds in a turn, a real hot turn. So
now segueing off that, before we jump over into Grey Knights, the one question I'll ask you, out of these 3, which one would you, if you had your wish list, which one of these 3 would you rather have? Codex with detachments and strats, or point reduction, or weapon and stratagem change for the current moment? Which do you think would fix them most right now?
I mean, we're not getting a Codex right now. They don't even have the roadmap yet. Honestly, I don't want it to be overpowered, but I think there needs to be some point adjustments. Like I said, the Terminators before. The Terminators need to come down 15 points or so. Because part of it is when I build this dev wound list, sometimes I'm having trouble finding just points for a few scoring units to go in there. But as far as rules, yeah, I think it is pretty tough that of the 6 stratagems, 3 of them only affect bolters on infantry. It really limits what you can do there. One of them is Armor of Contempt. One of them is a teleport strat, which is great. And the other one just allows me to choose one of those mission tactics for 1 unit.
But at the same time, your strats also do really well with kill teams, and kill teams aren't doing really well.
Yeah, they just don't have. They can't.
And I think that's a codex. That's a codex thing that needs to, like, with the balanced data slates and how things are condensed for simplicity purposes. I think that's one of those things that cannot be simple. And
can I just use my 9th edition codex? Is that? Can I have combat squatting?
That's
and
one
just
that
taking however many of the other units, the limitation of taking your 5 basic and then only 2 of the other ones. And that's on the Indomitor kill team, the Gravis one.
I miss combat squad so much.
Yeah. And it's on the other, there's 4 different types of kill teams. And it affects all of them. They have these limitations of how many models you can take. So I wish they would just take away that limitation. What I would like right now is for them to take away those limits and then just some point changes, because I think they missed out on a few point reductions. So that's really it. I feel like but again, it is kind of a more experienced player army, so I don't expect its win rate to ever be outstanding, because it's tough to collect. It's it's a very expensive hobby, and DeathWatch, as I just kind of discussed, it takes a lot to build the kill teams that it's based around.
So to kind of segue over into Grey Knights, I feel like the Grey Knights entirely just when you play the army, when you play Warhammer, this is a game of armies, destruction, everything else. And when you get into Grey Knights, right now the damage aspect is kind of wonky. There is some really cool, efficient ways to do damage. I mean, the tank shock off of a Dread Knight is crazy good damage. The side cannons into some targets can be amazing. Into others, not so much. And when you get the ones when you say not so much, it starts getting really bad. We don't have our hammers. Instead, it's just Nemesis weapons. We don't have any high AP damage weapons that aren't Imperium-based weapons. When you look at just what the Grey Knights have, they don't have access to that. We are not, as much as people want to say, oh, you're Space Marines. No, we are not. We are Adeptus Sanctus, which means we don't get aggressors. We don't get Centurions and any of that. We get all these teleporting tricks. And because of those teleporting tricks, that's what we have to utilize to win the game. Which means, and again, many, many, many games that you've seen with my Grey Knights, I am basically tabled and winning. because of points.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an aspect that I don't think a lot of people who play Warhammer, that's not how they want to play the game.
Right.
So I think that I think the reason that a lot of the Grey Knights are so low on that totem pole is because there are armies that are going into this, into matchups, into games that are trying to do more damage, and the hoops that we have to jump through are just too extravagant. Grey Knights are built on the framework of Space Marines, which means that our Grand Masters, our brother captains, fall into Lieutenant and Chapter Master, and one character leading a squad, which then means we don't have Apothecary, we don't have this, we don't have that. So a lot of the enhancements and abilities are missing. There is still a lot of really great enhancements, a lot of great abilities and stuff. I mean, we've seen it. Like First of the Fray is really strong. 35 points, kind of pricey, but still very strong. The Sigil of Exigence is huge. Amazing utility on that. Terminators being able to be OC3 is amazing. But all this stuff plays from a defensive standpoint. Offensively, we don't have that. Now, when you look at the previous, you have to look at the past to understand why some of the future is on this. Previous edition, Dread Knights out of a Sword Brethren's detachment was very, very strong. Running mech Grey Knights was very strong, where the Nemesis Dread Knights could hit, land, boost everything through the roof with some psychic powers, and then just terrorize things on the table. Issues I had with it were the psychic phase made it very unreliable, very easy to stop. So, I mean, a lot of armies being able to just spend a command point and deny on a 4-up and just completely shut everything down. Now with the change to the psychic phase, now the psychic powers are more reliable, but now we still have this swing, like the Librarians, for example. Librarians can do mortal wounds. That's great. They can do 2, 3, 4 mortal wounds on a hit. That's awesome. Then if you roll that 6, whew, that's a big hit. Then if you roll that 1, you want to cry. And I feel like that's such a big swing that you can't reliably utilize. Like in our matchup, I had the Librarian there backed up by a Land Raider to go into your tank. Mm-hmm. Granted, the Land Raider didn't do so well, and it only hit one las cannon that was able to hit home and finish it off after the Librarian did 3 mortal wounds. But needless to say, that's kind of where that falls, is that the damage is negligible. Your combat, negligible. You know, even units like the Paladins have 4 attacks. But then when you look at some of the other armies and what their abilities that they're able to do, Grey Knights were jumping through hoops to get any sort of near effect. At best, you can do with the Paladins in combat. I mean, you can give them devastating wounds on a battle tactic strat that costs 2 command points, once per game free on a Grand Master. But if you put the Grand Master in there, now you take your spot away for your Chaplain or your Librarian or Drago. And that's where I think some of this stuff starts getting mixed up, where the framework isn't strong enough. I think the Apothecary needs to be pulled out of the Terminators and put into a character spot so that it can join the Paladins or the Terminators, and now be able to allow us to have an enhancement in there, buffing another character and doing these little extras into it. Now, it could be completely overpowered, but I think the Apothecary missing from the Paladins is a huge miss. Paladins have a good defensive ability, but it's a defensive ability. And now that goes back to my point of how Grey Knights just play in defense. You know, we jump away with Mista Deimos. We move again with Interceptors. We have sticky objectives on Strike Squad. All these things, when you go through these abilities, are all defensive. Now, the Purifiers have offensive capabilities on their ability. You know, you lose 1 Purifier and they go up significantly. You Purge have indirect, but you're indirecting weapons that are AP1, so it's kind of meh. I like the Purge more for deep striking, landing, and putting 4 side cannons into a target from range. I like that. Incinerators are cool. You can throw 4 side cannons in an incinerator in that squad, or incinerators in a squad relatively cheap. And then it's just all around though. You fall into a column where you start to get to a miss of one thing's missing, this thing's missing, like the re-rolls. There's not a lot of re-rolls coming out of it. We don't have open moments. So we're not even getting the re-rolls on the hits, really. And it just the damage can be swingy, and the damage can be, and that can be a really poor selling point. So Grey Knights, unlike DeathWatch, when you buy a kit, and this is kind of also a blessing and a burden of the same thing, you buy a 10-man box of Strike. Well, that 10-man box of Strike can build you 10 Strike, it can build you Purge, it can build you Purifiers, it can build you Interceptors. Everything is all inclusive in that one box.
Mm-hmm.
So even as you get into Grey Knights as a new player and you go and you buy 2 boxes of Strike, and then they sit on your desk and you may not get them built right away, and you're theory crafting lists, you might suddenly go, oh man, I want Purifiers instead of Strike. Oh, well, you got them. They're on your table. But wait, I want Interceptors. You got them. You're on your table. I mean, I feel almost like I'm a Verizon commercial or whichever one. It's like, yep, it's that. It's that too. It's all that. And that's everything is included in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's beneficial to allowing newer players to be able to play it. Where DeathWatch have a problem with not as many players playing the army, which can lead to a lower percentage. Grey Knights, there's probably more players playing the army, but if you're pushing for damage, it just seems very, very far off. Now, I've seen some players, and I know there's going to be some like, well, wait, there's this list that went 5-0, and this list went. Absolutely, it can happen. You know, I mean, if you walk into a tournament, and I'm not trying to sound condescending with this, but if you walk into a tournament and hit every single one of your 9-inch charges, I don't know many armies that are going to withstand a Grey Knight force with like 30 Terminators that hit every single 9-inch charge.
Well, a lot of it is also experience in the Grey Knights, because if you don't know what Grey Knights can do, they will wreck you, because every single unit has some kind of movement special rule. Like their movement can just be overpowering. If you forget that if you move within 9 inches of them, they can pick up and jump away. That can completely mess with an opponent. So I think anybody who has gone 5-0 or 4-1 at a GT or something with Grey Knights, I don't want to take away from what they've achieved. But if they've, I mean, it's partly why Necrons did so well. Not to take away from Necrons doing well at LVO,
no,
because part of it was it's a new codex and it's new rules that people haven't played into yet. People aren't ready for a deep striking monolith to be 3 inches away from you. Again, it's not to take away from the people who have done well with it. You take the rules you have and you do well with them. But obviously, experience into things, it definitely plays into it. So Grey Knights, if you have not practiced in the Grey Knights, a Grey Knight player can't sit there and tell you all the rules that affect movement, because every single unit has a rule that it does some kind of movement shenanigans.
Mm-hmm. And you forget them too.
Yeah, I forget them. I forget them playing against you.
Yep. I mean, and that's the other thing. It's like a testament to Matt and going and winning LVO with that. And like you said, this is not selling down, because Matt, right before LVO, and this is something I don't think a lot of people have talked about, Matt before LVO went and won a GT 5-0 with that Hypercrypt list. So he put it out there, and people saw it, and people seen, oh, hey, there's a monolith. Oh, wow, you can, like, all the information was there on what he was going to do. And LVO, you go there, you expect that high level. So it just got to a point that there's 2 things that I've noticed. One, 10th edition has not been as kind in highlighting to zoning out. And I've seen a lot of players from that are not as strong with zoning out their zone as they were in previous editions, where the game kind of turtled. You could slowly move across the field, so you could build that deep strike bubble for those 3 turns. Now we have armies that are deep striking all game long, going all the way up until turn 5. So it gets harder to build that bubble, and at some point you just have to go, if you're going to drop there, you're going to drop there. There's nothing I can do. With strats that allow you to drop within 3 inches, with Inceptors that can do that. They can drop within 3 inches, the jump dudes.
Well,
So
they can drop, shoot, and then move.
right, and then you have the interceptors for me that can do that. They can drop, shoot, and move. I was talking about the inceptors for Space Marines that can just drop within 3 and plasma something to oblivion. So that's kind of allowed people. So people have not paid as much attention, I think, to zoning out on a whole, because there's so many things that you spend all this time blocking your deployment zone, and your opponent just says, well, I have the special rule and I drop within 3, and you're like, oh, why am I wasting the time? So instead you're zoning out a little area, and that's where Matt got people, because he was able to show that it's like, okay, well, if you're not going to really try and zone me out and you have no utilities for this, here's a monolith right in your face. And, I know the memes of rolling 6s on involves and stuff like that. You know what? This is a game of dice, baby. And if that's how you got it, you stuck that 6, congratulations. You earned it. Realistically, I'm not going to fault anyone for that. I'd roll a 6 on a Libby and blow up something you shouldn't have blown up. Yeah, of course. Of course. That's how it happens. That's how this game happens, But what Matt was able to do was he was able to take so much of what the Necrons can do now with the Hypercrypt. And one thing that the Necrons have that the Grey Knights don't, and that is more reliable shooting, and really bring that right into someone's face with the Immortals and everything else, and just be able to start carving out the backfield, where now your opponent has to focus so much on that backfield that any secondaries they're trying to do, they're losing focus on it. And Matt's able to just run that score up, and was able to keep running that score. Now, I know with player plays, a lot of people do fixed secondaries, but you drop a monolith in the backfield, bring a unit through there, that's behind enemy lines all day. And that's points every turn until you can answer that monolith. And that monolith's going to help you bring more and more of your army until finally your entire army is just sitting in their deployment zone. So, yeah, like we said, there's a lot of practice that goes into these lists, like these jump around teleporting lists. These are not easy to play by any stretch of the imagination. Grey Knights is not easy to play by any stretch of the imagination. And you have to really be comfortable with the fact that a lot of times your army is probably going to get tabled in order for you to win, because of how you're going to have to play it. Necrons are taking out that aspect because they're able to do the damage. So that's why I think that Hypercrypt has a very, very strong play right now into it, because of how much offense they can have. On the opposite, Grey Knights have a lot of strats and abilities that play more on the defense. Being able to, like you said, move and shoot and move and get onto objectives, jumping away, a lot of the strats, the Hypercrypt doesn't have a lone op strat, but Grey Knights do. Hypercrypt doesn't have the ability to pick up a unit after it's been moved into. The Grey Knights do. Now, Necrons have the ability to pick a unit up and bring it to the monolith when it's been shot at, after the shot's been resolved, which is cool. But you're not picking it up off the table, so it can be limiting. Not saying bad, just saying there is some things that it could be theoretically limiting. And then you have a bunch of different strats for the Grey Knights that affect, you get +1 to hit an assault weapon if you advance or deep struck that turn. That can be huge to help you be more accurate. But at the end, the weapons are still not having that damage. They don't have that punch. So you are, in the end of the day, with the Grey Knights, you're taking basically your entire army and focusing on something small to make sure it's gone. And even when you do that, because of the low AP, because of the low this, low that, the other, you may not even get those targets. And that's kind of where I feel like with Grey Knights. So I feel like anybody who's playing Grey Knights right now, I personally look at it as an MSU build. When I first played my very first game of 10th edition with cards, I played against Josh. And at the end of that game, I was like, I want to play Grey Knights because I see this aspect behind tactical objectives and what the game's going. I was like, this is it. This is what I want to play. I'm also a player who, from previous with Necrons, I'm perfectly fine with doing all these fancy tricks and just moving stuff around and playing 40K the game as opposed to playing 40K the war, which right now Grey Knights, it's just difficult for them to bring that war. You know, the damage the things that really do damage are very swingy, librarians and such, and other stuff you just put so much into, and it's just like one piece of the puzzle is missing. Like, I think the apothecary should be a character so he can be attached to Terminators or the Paladins. I think that would give a lot better utility to Paladins, being able to put one back off an apothecary, and also possibly bring an enhancement or something else to the field. You played against him a couple times. What are your thoughts as to what you feel with it? Because, you know, at the same time, I don't want Grey Knights to be overpowered by any stretch.
That's the trick. If you try to give them more damage output, I think then they can they're extremely mobile, and they are very durable in the sense that the entire army has 2-up save. If you go and make them too strong, then they're just impossible to deal with. Mm-hmm. I think the solution is probably a little give and take. I think you have to reduce some of their mobility abilities in exchange for damage output. I don't think they need points cuts because you have a lot of stuff, right?
No, I do. I think agree with that.
They're just it's overwhelming how many movement shenanigans they have between their stratagems and their enhancements and the special rules built into them. I think if you're going to make them hit harder, they need to lose a little bit of that movement stuff. It's just overwhelmingly too much. Because if interceptors can drop and then shoot and then move, well, if they can drop and then eliminate the target they shoot at and then move, it's too powerful. As it is, they drop and shoot storm bolters and maybe do a few wounds and move. But if you can't,
we can't have
it. You can't have them just acing things and moving.
Right, you can't have something like that looks like warp spiders.
Yeah, no.
In a Marine army, there
shouldn't be warp spiders anywhere in the game.
And unfortunately, I think that the give and take of this comes to the sense of I think that the Grey Knights are fine as a whole. The only thing that I would, if like looking through the entire codex from top to, or the index, I should say, from top to bottom, the only things that I think that need any sort of tweaking is taking the apothecary out of the Terminators and making it a character. And I think that's a big one. I'm fine with the banner being an upgrade for the unit because that's pretty much what everyone has, that upgrade banner character. But taking the apothecary out, making it a character so that you can be able to splash some of these enhancements in there, per se. You know, obviously maybe have an addendum for on an overwhelming wrath. I'm losing the secondary, the stratagem, the enhancement right now, but it's +1 to charge. Not being able to stack that with Drago, since Drago is +3 charge out of Deep Strike, so then you'd be looking at +4 charge on the unit.
Yeah, +3 is enough. You still need to roll some dice.
Yeah, I think that should that would be one to be like +3. This is not stackable with any other effects. Simple thing there. But I think what it comes down to is the same issue that we said with DeathWatch. Like you said, well, we're not seeing a codex in the near future, other than changing the apothecary. Everything else I'm pretty okay with. I would like to see maybe something with the Brotherhood champions. I feel like the Brotherhood champion should not join a squad, but should have more abilities to fight and be a lone op style character. I think he kind of would fall into that. Might be kind of cool.
Well, and when they give us a new codex, they say they're giving us new models. Sometimes it's new sculpts of old models, but do you think there's a new unit you could use?
Well, I think one of the things that the new sculpt is going to be, here's the big problem with Grey Knights. We do not have a Brother Captain or Grandmaster model. There is none at all. Their Nemesis Dread Knight technically doesn't have a Grandmaster version. Now, I think the Grandmaster version is very simple. I've seen the image in the last codex. There was an image of a hand of a Dread Knight with a sword, and the sword was down in the ground. And the way it looked, it didn't look like it was a conversion. It looked like it was a sprue. And I feel like that's going to be something we will see in the near future, where that's going to be included into a sprue. I mean, realize it was like 2 years ago, when 2 years prior to the release of the Overlord with Translocation, that it was teased on Games Workshop. So I have a feeling that this is there. I have a feeling that this hand and maybe another shield, like a shoulder shield or just something tiny to change it over to a Grandmaster. I think that's going to start getting included in the Dread Knight kit. I think that unfortunately, that's probably going to be one of the four. If there was going to be four, the second one is probably going to be a Grandmaster model, which will probably go onto a bigger base for an actual Terminator, kind of like yours is. Your brother Captain out on a bigger base. I think that's going to be that's going to be a thing. And then hopefully they actually do give us a new unit. I would love to see an actual new Grey Knight unit. And I feel like that's, we're well overdue for that. So I think we could use a new Psychic unit. Would be cool, especially since Servitors will probably be gone, most likely, since they're kind of leaving everyone's codex now. Servitors are becoming obsolete.
Yeah.
We're upgrading. We've traded in our Servitors. So that's the biggest thing. But I think that all in all, where the damage output is going to come into it and the reducing the movement ability, it's going to come down to detachments. We're going to see probably a Grey Knight detachment that allows us to boost psychic attacks or things with the psychic keyword, which now goes into the Nemesis weapons, which are psychic. And I think those are going to be, there's going to be a way to be like, oh, if the weapon's psychic, do this. If the weapon's psychic, do that. You're going to start seeing stuff to be able to boost those. And I think that's going to be the forefront of where it all happens.
Or hashtag make Grey Knights smite again. We'll bring back the smite. Do some D3 mortals. Every unit gets to do D3
so
mortals.
I built a list back, and I built, no. It was one. It was one mortal because you could do it all over the place, but it didn't
it was
go up
one,
in value.
But it was 3 if you were playing into demons.
Right. And then if you had, you could change your tides. And one of the tides gave you +1 to your smite. So I did run a list. It was a Mimi list, but it was all strike. Like 6 squads of strike. I think 3 of them were 10-man, so I could combat squad them. But it was literally, and then I ran the Brotherhood Champion, or the Brother Captain, so I could extend the smite range by whatever it was. I can't remember at the time. Might have been double or something. Mm-hmm. And I would there was a couple of units I put on table, like Dreadnoughts or something like that, just to meet the requirement. And everything else was a deep strike. And I just land in one spot and just go, hi, here, I'm going to do like 35 mortal wounds in here. And if anything's left alive, you can try and kill me at that point. Because everything's power armor and go for it. Man, that 2-up save they gave Grey Knights is really nice. That's a real big
that's an interesting choice.
Really was. But again, it plays over into the fact that I feel like Grey Knights are a defensive army. And if you can't play from the losing perspective, can't play from just, I'm not trying to do damage, I'm trying to make you not do damage, I think it's kind of where they struggle, There is a lot of interesting ways that Grey Knights can get damage, but to make it the reliable source, such as something like Tome of Ectoclades can do, that you can build an army around and go, okay, I have one turn that I can remove 2 things, regardless of what they are. Mm-hmm. Grey Knights don't have that as much because there's a lot of aspects of luck that somewhere in that combo requires a luck of a high dice roll or something to fully implement it. And again, these are just our opinions and our thoughts, and just food for thought to get you guys thinking. Feel free to comment down below. Let us know your thoughts and what you think. Maybe there's some combinations with DeathWatch that Lane hasn't tried. The bikes that he recently tried were a fan recommended selection. I've had a lot of people comment on my Land Raider, and the biggest thing with the Land Raider is, and this is where we'll kind of leave this off in. Lane and I have discussed this as well too, like, oh, why not go over to a Rhino? It's cheaper. So you go into the Rhino, which is cheaper, and then you have these points left over. And then you literally go through everything else in the codex and the index, and you think I could do this, but no this, but that. And when you get down to it and you start looking at it, and you look at like Purge for weapons, then I look over at that Land Raider again and go, but you have 4 las cannons, and you're really not that expensive. And it just turns into a sense of, I want one transport body for what I can do with the interceptors coming off that thing. I mean, that's insane enough. That's strong, so strong in its own right. To be able to move, disembark 3, move 12, auto advance 6 if I want, or shoot and then move 6. I mean, the amount of how far that unit covers is just disgusting. So I want that in my list the list I've been playing lately. I mean, there's some other ones I've thought about that might change, but I want that in this list currently. When I take out the Land Raider and go with a Rhino or a Razorback, it just ends up coming up like I can't find anything else that I like for the synergy of my list to spend those extra points on. So I end up just going back to the Land Raider and going, well, at least I have some anti-tank. And I mean, granted, the Land Raider does good into Rhinos and Armigers and stuff like that. Stuff that I'm able to get over its toughness and at least wound on 3s. The Land Raider does well into. And it looked cool. I love my Land Raider. Even though Lane hates the fact that it's on top. It is not ugly.
It was dropped when it was a baby.
It was not ugly. The only problem with you have with this thing is that it's flat on top. That's the only problem that you have with this
It'll be all right if it's flat. It's got a weird dome. It's bulging.
Well, we'll look into possible conversions. I do actually kind of want to do some work on that Land Raider and give it a little more love. Some little defects I've seen in photographs that I'm not going to say because then everyone else will notice them. But there's things that I've thought about, and I kind of want to bring some life back to it. And also, I think I might be sometime here soon putting a 3rd Land Raider. So maybe I'll just be bringing, just bring 3 Land Raiders one day. I got them. So, it's like, hey, why not? Not that expensive when you really look at it, Like, they're like, I think the last Cannon one's $260, a Crusader's like $235, $240.
No, the last Cannon one's $240.
Okay,
in Marines, I don't know if it's different.
It might. I think it's the same, but like the Crusader's cheaper.
I thought about it in Custodes because they hit on 2s, like Custodes. The same cost as a regular Land Raider, but everything hits on 2s. Anyways, tune in for that.
There you go. But yeah, no, I've considered. I've looked at them like too. It's like, oh, ha ha ha, take the Land Raiders, and I look. It's like there's a lot of other tanks that cost roughly around this, and this isn't that bad. I mean, 2-up save. That 2-up save comes in handy because like AP1, it's a 3-up. AP2, it's a 4-up. AP3, now we're getting the anti-tank weapons, like the higher class ones. You're looking at a 5-up, which some people are spending a command point to give their vehicle a 5-up invuln. And then when you get to 4, which is the super heavy, hard-hitting anti-tank weapons, I'm still getting a 6. 1 command point, I'm getting that 5-up invuln or armor contempt. And like you've shown in many times on the channel as well, if you got the 2 command points, smoke and true silver for me, armor contempt for you, now you're looking at cover, reducing AP, and -1 to hit.
Yep.
Which now we talk about that AP4, well, you got the cover, now it's AP, looks like AP3. And you have your armor, contempt, or true silver. So now you're looking at it looking like AP2. Now you're looking at a 4-up.
Yep.
2 command points, but that can be game breaking. Where now all of a sudden your opponent just set up to eliminate, and it didn't happen. And that's something that, I mean, Rhinos can do that too, but Rhinos are a lower toughness, less wounds.
3-up armor, yeah.
3-up armor and 3-up armor too. So, all right, guys, that's it for this today. Tune in to check out some more of our videos and we talk more about DeathWatch and Grey Knights. I'm actually, I'm working on some stuff with the next Necron detachment that I'm going to be working on, which is probably going to be the Obsidics.
Obeisance?
I'll get it right. But it's the one that is more character-based, one Lich Guard and stuff like that. That's the next route I want to go. I don't want to stay on Hypercrypt too much because I think that the internet's getting the Hypercrypt kind of mashed out now. And also once we see balanced data slates, that may change a lot of stuff there too with that build. I have a good grasp on it after my last game, so I feel okay with it. When we get more to a GT, if that's the route I want to go, but I want to start moving through some of the other detachments. So I think that's going to be what I'm working on, as well as some silly things I want to try with Grey Knights in some of these non-existent damage aspects that we talk about that I said.
Trying to do less damage?
Oh, no, I'm just going to, just one of these things, just like, oh, look, here's 30 Terminators or 20 Terminators or something, and just, and then some other silly things. Like, okay, so Terminators take up 2 capacity on a Land Raider, where Strike and other units only take up 1. So something like the Land Raider Crusader that has a capacity 16, I could put 15 purifiers in.
Do you have access to the different Land Raiders?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I could put 15. Yeah. Oh, does the army have access? Yes. Yeah. I get all 3 classes.
Okay.
So I could put the purifiers in there and 15 bodies in there, 3 5-man squads. It has an assault ramp so they can get out and charge. But now you're looking at a unit that gets bonuses if I lose any models, I get bonuses. And the flamers coming out of there, because probably I'd take flamers.
Mm-hmm.
And then you still have a unit that could potentially hit. Plus, since it's 16 capacity, one of those 5-mans can be led by Crow. So you're looking at, though that's something I was looking at, just because they have the best combat potential coming out of the Land Raider in most aspects of it. Interceptors don't, strike don't. That's basically all of them. Terminators do, but again, now we go back into the 2-for-1 column, So that's something I was curious about. Also thinking about, like, again, with the going back to Land Raider Crusader and having capacity 16, just put 3 5-man squads of purgation in there with 4 side cannons in each. So here I have this boat that just moves up and unloads 15 guys with a total of 4, 8, 12 side cannons.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't AP1. That's the problem. Is because that's like, yes, I'm going to shoot everything at that. 1 CP, it's in cover. Okay, well, you got 2 up saves.
Yep.
And then you're 3 wounds. Oh, I do 2 damage. Yeah, they need a way to power up those psychic things. Man, that's where it comes down to, is you don't need to change much of the data sheets. We need to see a new detachment. Hopefully, what I'm really hoping Games Workshop does is, we're waiting for codexes, and codexes are going to take time, that they maybe will, some of the codexes that they know are going to be on the end of the slate, they kind of just go and say, hey, here's another detachment for these codexes to bide you over until we get to your actual codex.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, hey, listen, I can wish in one hand, all right? All right, guys. Well, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.